Natasha had barely lifted her fork when her brother leaned back in his chair, swirled the wine in his glass, and smiled the way he always did when he thought everyone was on his side. "Still single," Ethan said loudly enough for the entire table to hear. "No spouse, no kids. Guess somebody has to be the lonely aunt forever." Laughter burst around the anniversary dinner table. Their father slapped the table. Their mother covered her mouth, laughing even harder. Ethan shrugged dramatically. "Hey, I'm just saying what everyone's thinking." Natasha looked from one face to another. Not a single person told him to stop. She slowly placed her fork beside her plate. "How's your bank account?" she asked quietly. Ethan blinked, then laughed. "Excuse me." "Oh," Natasha said, meeting his eyes without raising her voice. "Right, I've been paying your bills." His grin didn't disappear. Until today. Silence swallowed the room so completely that the soft music from the restaurant suddenly seemed deafening. For the first time all evening, Ethan wasn't smiling. The anniversary dinner had started like every other family celebration. Their parents insisted everyone meet at the same restaurant every year. Ethan would arrive late, full of stories about business opportunities and promotions. His wife would smile politely beside him. Their parents would beam with pride. And sooner or later, someone would compare Ethan's life to Natasha's. It had become a ritual. Ethan has such a beautiful family. Ethan's kids are growing so fast. Natasha, you work too much. You'll understand real happiness someday. Normally, Natasha smiled through it. Normally, she changed the subject. Normally, she protected everyone from the truth. Tonight was different. Ethan leaned forward again, forcing another laugh. "Come on, Nat. You seriously expect us to believe you're paying my bills?" She reached calmly into her handbag. Instead of answering, she placed several neatly organized payment confirmations on the white tablecloth. Mortgage assistance, insurance payments, utility extensions, loan settlements. Each document carried her name. Their mother's smile faded first. Their father's eyebrows pulled together. Ethan barely glanced at the papers before scoffing. "So what? You paid something once." Natasha stood. "No," she said evenly, "not once." She picked up her purse. "You'll understand tomorrow morning." She walked away before anyone could stop her. Behind her, chairs scraped against the floor. Nobody followed. Nobody even seemed to remember how. The restaurant doors closed behind Natasha with a soft click, leaving the Brooks family staring at paperwork they had never imagined existed. Inside the dining room, Ethan finally found his voice. "Natasha." His confidence had disappeared. "What exactly did you just do?" Natasha sat behind the wheel of her car without turning the engine on. The restaurant's lights reflected across the windshield, blurring as tears filled her eyes. She rested both hands on the steering wheel and let out a shaky breath she had been holding for years. She hadn't imagined standing up for herself would hurt this much. Her phone buzzed. "Mom calling." She silenced it. A second later, her father called. Then Ethan. She placed the phone face down on the passenger seat. For the first time in years, she wasn't rushing to solve a family emergency. Instead, she sat alone with the realization that every insult she'd quietly accepted had been financed by her own generosity. Her thoughts drifted backward. 6 years earlier, her mother had arrived unexpectedly at her apartment, eyes red from crying. "Please don't let Ethan lose the house," she'd whispered. "The children don't deserve that." Natasha had written the first check without hesitation. "It's only until he gets back on his feet," her father had promised. Then came another phone call months later. Ethan lost his job. Another transfer. A year after that. The insurance lapsed. Another payment. Then school tuition. Then overdue utilities. Then a personal loan that Ethan had sworn he could repay within weeks. Every time Natasha hesitated, her parents used the same words. "Don't tell him. He'd be embarrassed. You're the responsible one." She had believed she was protecting her family. Instead, she'd been protecting a lie. Ethan never knew the mortgage company had almost foreclosed. He never knew the lights stayed on because Natasha quietly paid the balance after work. He never knew collectors stopped calling because she negotiated directly with them during her lunch breaks. Each rescue disappeared into silence. Each success became another story about Ethan's determination. By the time Natasha reached her condominium, she felt exhausted rather than angry. She unlocked the door, walked into the quiet living room, and set her purse on the dining table. Then she opened her laptop. One folder sat on the desktop. Family assistance. She clicked it open. The screen filled with years of carefully organized records. Bank transfers. Email chains. Scanned repayment agreements. Payment confirmations. Notes documenting conversations with lenders. Reminder emails Ethan had never answered because they had been redirected to her after she'd agreed to act as an emergency contact. She slowly opened a spreadsheet. The total at the bottom made her pause. 6 years. Hundreds of payments. More money than she had ever spent on herself. She leaned back in her chair. "If I stop now," she whispered into the empty apartment. Her finger hovered over the keyboard. For a brief moment, she pictured Ethan's children. They had never mocked her. They hugged her every Christmas. They drew birthday cards, calling her their favorite aunt. Closing her eyes, she almost convinced herself to make one more payment. Just one. Then another memory pushed its way forward. Ethan's smirk. Still single. No spouse. No kids. The sound of her parents laughing. Natasha opened the first creditor account. She selected Cancel Automatic Payment Authorization *. A confirmation box appeared. "Are you sure?" She clicked yes. One by one, she logged into every account she had quietly managed over the years. Mortgage assistance. Cancelled. Utility guarantee. Cancelled. Insurance premium authorization. Cancelled. Personal loan payment schedule. Cancelled. Each confirmation email arrived within seconds. Each click felt strangely lighter than the one before. Finally, only one account remained. The oldest agreement. The first promise she'd ever made to protect Ethan's family. She stared at it longer than all the others. Then, without speaking another word, she canceled it too. The final confirmation appeared on the screen. Natasha closed the laptop and looked out into the darkness beyond her apartment window. For the first time in 6 years, Ethan's future no longer rested on her shoulders. She wondered how long the life he bragged about could survive without the person who had secretly been holding it together. The next morning, Ethan walked into his office carrying a coffee in one hand and his phone in the other. He still couldn't believe Natasha's performance at dinner. "What a ridiculous stunt," he muttered as he greeted the receptionist. Before he even reached his office, his phone rang. "Mr. Brooks," a woman's professional voice asked. "This is regarding your mortgage account. The third-party payment authorization attached to your account has been withdrawn. Your outstanding balance is now immediately due." Ethan frowned. "There has to be some mistake." "I'm afraid there isn't, sir." He hung up before she could finish. Unbelievable. He had barely taken another step when his phone rang again. This time, it was the electric company. Then his insurance provider. Then his credit card company. Each conversation sounded different. Each message was the same. The financial arrangements that had been keeping his accounts current no longer existed. By 10 o'clock, the confidence he'd carried into work had completely vanished. Meanwhile, across town, Natasha's apartment buzzer rang repeatedly. She already knew who it would be. When she opened the door, her parents rushed inside without waiting to be invited. Her mother looked pale. "What have you done?" Her father held several printed notices in his hand. "We've been getting calls all morning," he said. "They're saying payments have stopped. Tell us this is some misunderstanding." Natasha remained calm. "It isn't." "You can't be serious," her mother said. "The children." "I know exactly who the children are," Natasha interrupted gently. "That's why I helped for 6 years." Her parents stared at her. Without raising her voice, Natasha walked to the dining table and placed a thick binder in front of them. "Open it." Her father slowly flipped through the first section. Every page contained a date. Every date matched a payment. Mortgage shortages. Insurance premiums. Utility bills. Loan settlements. His hand slowed. "This." He turned another page. "This can't be right." "It is," Natasha replied. Her mother grabbed another section. "These numbers." She looked up. "You kept all of this?" "I had to. For 6 years." Natasha nodded once. "I documented everything." Before either parent could respond, the apartment doorbell rang again. Ethan stormed inside the moment Natasha opened the door. His face was flushed with anger. "So this is your plan," he snapped. "Humiliate me because you're bitter." Natasha didn't answer immediately. She simply slid another folder across the table. "Read it." "I don't need paperwork." "No," she said evenly. "You need the truth." Ethan pushed the folder away without opening it. "I built everything I have." Natasha met his eyes. "No." The single word stopped him. "You built the image," she continued. "I paid for the parts that kept collapsing." Their father looked from Ethan to Natasha. "You knew about all of this?" he asked Ethan. Ethan hesitated. I handled things." Natasha quietly shook her head. "No, Ethan." She folded her hands on the table. "I didn't embarrass you." The apartment fell silent. Then she finished the sentence that neither of them could deny. "I stopped hiding your choices." Her mother's shoulders slumped. For the first time, neither parent defended Ethan. He looked around the room, waiting for someone to take his side. No one did. "You'll all regret this," he said, turning toward the door. "I'll fix it myself." He slammed the door behind him. Outside, he took only a few steps before his phone rang again. He answered impatiently. "What now?" As he listened, the color drained from his face. He stopped walking. Without saying another word, he stared into the distance as the caller calmly explained what losing those financial guarantees actually meant. Ethan lowered himself onto a bench outside the office building, his phone still pressed against his ear. "I'm sorry, Mr. Brooks," the bank representative repeated. "Several accommodations on your accounts were approved because they were personally guaranteed by a third party. Those guarantees have now been formally withdrawn." Ethan swallowed. "So, what does that mean?" "It means your accounts return to their original terms immediately. We've scheduled a meeting this afternoon to discuss your options." The line went quiet. For the first time in years, there was no invisible safety net waiting beneath him. He ended the call and stared at the pavement. Within minutes, another notification appeared. Insurance coverage pending cancellation. Another. Past due balance required immediately. Another. Urgent mortgage review. Every message confirmed the same thing. Natasha hadn't been exaggerating. She had simply stopped standing between him and the consequences of his own decisions. That afternoon, Ethan returned home much earlier than usual. His wife, Melissa, looked up from the kitchen table. "You're home early." He forced a smile. "Just a busy day." Before he could walk upstairs, she held up a large envelope. "This came by courier." He froze. It contained copies of notices from lenders, along with updated account information. Melissa frowned as she read through them. Ethan, why are these saying someone else's guarantees were removed? He reached for the papers. I'll handle it. She pulled them back. No. She kept reading. One page referred to a payment extension. Another listed a personal guarantee signed by Natasha Brooks. Another mentioned years of negotiated repayment arrangements. Melissa slowly looked up. Natasha. Ethan didn't answer. You told me every time we got through one of these situations, it was because of your bonuses. Silence. You said your investments covered everything. Still nothing. Her voice became quieter. Were you lying to me? Ethan lowered his eyes. He couldn't find a single sentence that would erase 6 years of deception. Across town, Natasha's parents sat together in their living room. Neither of them had turned on the television. Her father quietly rubbed his forehead. Do you remember when Ethan almost lost the house? Her mother nodded. I remember Natasha leaving dinner early that week. And when the insurance problem disappeared, she suddenly canceled her vacation. Another memory surfaced. The tuition payment. She said she'd postpone replacing her car. The room became painfully still. One by one, moments they had barely noticed began fitting together. Every crisis in Ethan's life had disappeared shortly after Natasha quietly sacrificed something in hers. Neither of them had ever asked why. The following morning, Natasha sat across from her financial advisor. A folder rested neatly between them. So, he said with a smile, are you finally ready to discuss your own future? Natasha smiled back. Yes. For real this time. For real. Instead of reviewing another emergency transfer, they discussed retirement contributions, long-delayed investments, and finally, purchasing the townhouse she'd postponed for years because someone else always seemed to need the money more. When she signed the paperwork authorizing the first investment, she felt lighter than she had in years. Her phone buzzed. Ethan. She considered ignoring it. Instead, she answered. I need to see you, he said, his confidence completely gone. They met later that afternoon at a quiet park. Ethan looked exhausted. I just need one more loan, he said. Just enough to get caught up. I'll pay you back. Natasha studied him for a long moment. I've heard that before. This time I mean it. She nodded slowly. I believe you want to. He looked hopeful. But I've already given you 6 years. The hope disappeared from his face. There isn't anything left for me to give. She stood from the bench. For the first time, she walked away without looking back. Ethan remained seated, watching the only person who had quietly carried his life for years disappear down the path. Before anyone else could speak into the heavy silence that followed, Melissa stepped forward, looking at Ethan, then at his parents. Her voice was calm. There's something all of you need to hear. Melissa looked around the living room before taking a slow breath. I think everyone deserves to know the truth, she said. No one interrupted her. Ethan sat with his elbows on his knees, staring at the floor. Their parents watched him, waiting for him to deny whatever was coming. He didn't. Melissa placed a small stack of papers on the coffee table. I found these after the bank meeting. They were copies of emails, payment confirmations, and correspondence between Natasha and various lenders. She picked up the first page. This one is from 5 years ago. She looked directly at Ethan. You told me your year-end bonus caught us up on the mortgage. She set it down and picked up another. This one says Natasha negotiated an extension and paid the overdue balance herself. Another document. You told me your promotion covered the insurance. She shook her head. It didn't. One by one, she walked through the years. Every financial crisis had the same ending. Not a promotion. Not an investment. Not a business success. Natasha. Melissa turned toward Natasha. You reached out to me more than once. Natasha nodded quietly. I offered help, she said, but Ethan always asked me not to tell you. He said he would explain everything when things improved. Melissa's eyes filled with disappointment rather than anger. They never improved, did they? Ethan closed his eyes. No. The word barely escaped his lips. Their father slowly reached for the binder Natasha had brought the previous day. This time, he read every page. Every transfer. Every signed repayment promise. Every missed deadline. When he finished, he removed his glasses and rubbed his face. We kept praising you, he said to Ethan, his voice heavy. All those years. No one answered. Their mother looked at Natasha, with tears running silently down her cheeks. I laughed, she whispered. Last night, I laughed. Natasha didn't accuse her. She simply nodded. You did. I thought, her mother began before stopping herself. I never asked what you were giving up. You never needed to, Natasha replied gently. You assumed I'd figure it out. The room fell silent again. This silence felt different. It wasn't shock anymore. It was understanding. Ethan finally stood. He walked toward his sister, but stopped several feet away. I don't expect you to forgive me. Natasha remained still. I spent years pretending I was successful, he continued. It was easier than admitting I needed help. His voice cracked. And once everyone believed it, I kept lying. He looked down. Worse than that, I let everyone laugh at you. Natasha held his gaze. You did. I'm sorry. There was no excuse. No attempt to blame their parents. No demand for another chance. Just an apology that had arrived years too late. Natasha took a slow breath. I accept that you're sorry. Hope flickered across Ethan's face. But accepting your apology doesn't mean things go back to the way they were. He nodded. I know. And for the first time, he truly sounded like he did. Over the following months, Ethan's life changed dramatically. The luxury SUV was sold. Weekend trips disappeared. He worked overtime, met with financial counselors, and negotiated repayment plans himself instead of expecting someone else to solve them. Progress was slow, but for the first time, it was built on honesty instead of appearances. Melissa stayed beside him, not because the lies hadn't hurt, but because he finally stopped telling them. Their parents changed too. Whenever Ethan struggled, they offered practical help instead of calling Natasha. More importantly, they stopped measuring their children's worth by outward success. They called Natasha simply to ask how she was doing. Not to borrow money. Not to ask for favors. Just to listen. Meanwhile, Natasha met with her financial advisor again. This time, there were no emergency transfers to discuss. She completed the purchase of the townhouse she had postponed for years. She furnished it exactly the way she wanted. She restarted the vacations she had canceled. She reconnected with friends whose invitations she had declined because someone else's bills always came first. For the first time in years, every dollar she earned helped build her own future. Months later, the family gathered for another dinner. The atmosphere was noticeably different. No one made jokes about Natasha's personal life. No one compared siblings. Conversations centered on work, hobbies, travel, and the grandchildren without using them as a measure of anyone's worth. As the evening came to an end, Ethan walked with Natasha to the parking lot. Thank you for everything you did, he said quietly. I should have said that years ago. Natasha smiled faintly. I didn't need the thanks then. She unlocked her car. I needed the respect. He lowered his head. I understand. This time, she believed he did. She drove home, knowing she had not destroyed her family. She had ended a pattern that never should have existed. The greatest gift she ever gave herself wasn't exposing her brother. It was finally refusing to carry a life that was never hers to finance.